Yeah, but we've got quorum. We got quorum. I'd like to call the meeting to order, please. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have quorum. It is 9:38 or 37? 36. Okay. So we will use your iPhone, Councillor Fracadakis. So welcome to meeting number 18 of the Economic Development Committee. I'd like to welcome the returning members of the committee, and I'd like to welcome those who we have just drafted and signed to new two-year terms agreement. Not signed. Mark is holding out. And to also the members of the of council who are maybe not members of the committee, but maybe here, and I see none at the moment, but welcome them anyways. And also to the members of the public who are here in the room with us this morning. We also have, in this room, there's a screen at the back to my left, to most of you, your right. It provides update on real-time activities that are taking place here with respect to the agenda. This morning. It demonstrates or shows you what's coming up next and what we have gone through and so on. So if you want to follow on that particular screen, you're welcome to do that as well. I'd also like to let folks know that they can actually follow us, follow the agenda and the debate discussion on their computers, tablets, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. I'd also like to, and we do this at all of our meetings, that we state that the Economic Development Committee is in fact very grateful, and that we acknowledge that this meeting is actually taking place on the traditional territory of the Mississauga of the New Credit First Nation. And obviously this area is home to many indigenous people and so on, so we're quite grateful of that. So, moving right along, and with respect to the agenda, are there any declaration of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? I'm seeing none. Thank you. I'd like to ask for a confirmation of the minutes from the November 28 minutes, and since we have two new draft and selection to the committee, I can ask Councillor Fracadakis, who is a veteran of the committee, to move the report. Councillor? And was here for that. So thank you very much. All those in favor of confirmation of the minutes? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. We have a number of, I have a list that shows we have a number of speakers and so on, so we will get to those in a moment. The first item on the agenda, and it's always a pleasure to get through this particular one, it is the ED 18.1, and that's the election of a vice chair for the Economic Development Committee. The clerk has provided me with the process and procedures that I, as the chair, need to follow, and so I'm now asking, are there any nominations for the position of vice chair of the Economic Development Committee? Councillor Fracadakis, I see you.
Yes, thank you, sir. Mr. Chair, I would like to nominate Councillor Holland.
Okay. Councillor Holland, I'm looking at you. Do you accept that nomination?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And then I have to ask, are there any further nominations for the position of vice chair for the Economic Development Committee? That's one, and I'm required to ask that 3 times, and I'm asking now my second time. Are there any further nomination for the position of vice chair of the Economic Development Committee? Seeing none, that's twice. And finally, are there any further nominations for the position of Vice Chair of the Economic Development Committee? I will now call the nomination will now be closed. I see no further nomination. I'd like to now welcome and congratulate Councillor Holland on being selected as the Vice Chair of the Economic Development Committee. Councillor Holland, congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, you have a choice. You actually now, according to the clerk, could move to my left, or if you wish to stay to Councillor Grimes' right, it's totally up to you.
That's an easy.
Apparently, you're,
Shake your hand.
I'll be moving on the next committee meeting. I'll stay.
very diplomatic.
Vote on that.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so we declare that Councillor Holland is the vice chair of the committee, and Madam Clerk, we'll leave that here. Okay, so we are done, ladies and gentlemen. I now have the pleasure of, let me just go through the agenda rather quickly. ED 18.2, that's the Economic Development and Cultural Division. That's a peer awards, and we will get to the general manager in one moment. So we will just hold that for one moment. ED 18.3, Economic Development Committee's 2017 priorities and update. That is me. I have a series of comments to make on that matter, so I will hold that. ED 18.4, Economic Development Outlook. So we have a presenter, Mary Webb, who's here. She's the Director, Economic and Fiscal Policy with the Scotiabank Economics, and she'll be presenting, so we will hold that item down. All right, ED 18.5, that is the Canada-European Union Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. We have a number of speakers with respect to that item. Corrado Pena is here, and I believe that Mario Negro is here as well, who's partner with the Toronto office of Stikeman Elliott, so I will hold that item down. ED 18.6. Okay, so Councillor Frakadakis is moving this particular item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Moving right along to ED 18.7, Business Improvement Areas, BIA's 2017 operating budgets. Councillor Grimes, are you moving? Okay, Councillor Grimes is moving the item. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. All right, moving right along, ED 18.8, appointments to Business Improvement Areas, Board of Management. Councillor Kelly is moving approval. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. ED 18.9, TO Core project updates. We have a debutant on that particular one. Yes, we do. Okay, I'll hold that down. John Hayes here. Okay. And then also ED 18.10, we have a dep on that item as well, and that's the establishment of an internet movie database page. I don't know whether or not Councillor Fletcher is in the building. I know she has an interest in this as well. So may I ask the clerk when we do get to this item if Councillor Fletcher doesn't, she's not here? Okay. So okay, thank you, Councillor, but we'll still reach out to her office, just the same. All right, we'll hold that item down. And then finally, we have ED 18.11. Pardon? Okay, fair enough. That's the Toronto Economic Bulletin, and we will hold that in Councillor Frakadakis' name, right? So, thank you very much. I will now then move back to 18.2, and I see the general manager. He's all ready. Mr. Williams, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think for this I will stand, if that's okay with the committee. Thanks to the chair and to the committee for the opportunity for us to recognize some exceptional performance by many of the staff in the Economic Development and Culture Division, plus a couple of other people that were involved in some of our projects. So we have 4 categories of awards for staff. These are all nominees. The people nominated were nominated by their peers, hence the name. There were 20 nominations. We need Pricewaterhouse and Ernst & Young to help us resolve and make sure the process was all very fair and equal and done appropriately to all rules. There are a number of honorable mentions, and When I read out your name, if you could just stand and you'll get a nice clap, and then thank you. And then for the winners, we have some very, very expensive trophies at the front that our chair and our DCM will congratulate the winners with those. So without further ado, I'll jump into the 4 categories of awards. The first one is for exceptional innovation, and it can go to either an individual or a group, and that's for a new way of thinking, whether it's using technology, whether it's concepts, a new approach to things. So we have 2 honorable mentions in this one, one to a staff and one to a group. Jason Campbell is an honorable mention for the Toronto Economic Bulletin, which Councillor Pragadakis has just held. It's a new format. And so Jason, if you'd stand, is Jason here? I didn't see him. I haven't seen him all week, actually. So, and then the other honorable mention is for the Mayor's Music Sponsorship Roundtable, which is a brand new approach to the way we got input from a large community. And for that, Mike Tanner, Amara Nawagu, and Angie Camara honorable mentions. And I think I saw some of those. So that just leaves the winner to announce. And the winner goes to the Digital Main Street team, which is a very successful project done in partnership with several people, several companies. Chris Rickett, Nirvana Champion, and Ilana Lotto. So if the 2 of you would be, is Chris back there too, or just the 2 of you? Yeah, let's do it now, please. And does anybody have a camera that's, this is the one part I didn't arrange. Somebody got a cell phone that can you do it, Mike? This team produced an innovative program which provided the tools for small businesses to connect and compete in an online shopping world, key in building the city of the 21st century. They also parlayed $200,000 worth of sponsorship with both Rogers and MasterCard into ongoing promotion, where both those companies use this program in their advertising, and those that have been on the subway will have seen some of the MasterCard ads there, so that it gets even more life. And it's a terrific piece of innovation. Thanks very much. So exceptional customer service is the second category. This has demonstrated success in providing the highest level of customer service to customers, clients, and community partners. This can apply to an individual or a team. All the nominees are individuals in this case. And it shows the broader reach of what we really mean by customer service when you hear the award winner. So honorable mentions are to Morella Martino in our BA office and Maggie Newell, who works in the Gibson House Museum in North York. Neither of them are here. Morella's not here. Morella's not here, and Maggie's not here. They're hard at work out at their different operations. And the winner goes to Elizabeth Brown. This is an example that customer service can both be internal or external. Elizabeth is our manages the EDC's payroll. She's an outstanding. She's the division's SOLE, S-O-L-E, but also more appropriately the S-O-U-L of the payroll function. She consistently completes her overwhelming, time-sensitive workload with very real deadlines, i.e. if she doesn't do her job, a lot of people don't get paid, with a calm, naturally engaging, and pleasant approach that appears to make everything look effortless. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Exceptional results is the third category, and we've given the nominations. We split this into one for a team and one for an individual. The team honorable mention goes to the folks who dreamed up and delivered Shades of Old Islington, which was a Halloween special event at Montgomery's Inn this past year, and it was so successful we're going to continue to do that. And it was Iona McKay and Tom Travellini. Probably murdered that last name. The individual staff honorable mention goes to Romina Almaraza. Who's in the EDC's Administrative Support Unit for Arts and Culture. So the winners are in the team category, and this is about half the division, the Beatles 50 TO team. So Jane French, Wayne Reeves, Neil Brochu, Alex Avachuk, Arlena Aida Messina, Frida Camp, Anastasia Sardok, Mike Tanner, Alok Sharma, Robert Kerr, and Lori Belzak. They created a number of highlight events, including a sold-out recreation of the last concert of the Beatles in the upper bowl of Maple Leaf Gardens, which is now called the Mattamy Center, and a very fascinating and comprehensive set of displays at the Market Gallery took Torontonians back to the hip music scene in the 60s in Toronto. And maybe Frida and I are probably the only two that were around at the time that could remember those sort of things. My father actually had a restaurant in Yorkville in those days, so I did hang out down there. And the winner in the individual category is Rebecca Condon of the IMET Tax Incentive Program. Rebecca has managed the IMET Tax Incentive Program almost from its inception, almost by herself, except she now has very strong support within the division, but she also has exceptional support from planning and legal, etc. Most recently, Rebecca played an enormous role in obtaining Council's approval of the largest IMET grant ever for 45-141 Bay Street. Rebecca demonstrates qualities which make her effective, including commitment, clear vision, being a big picture thinker, perseverance, and problem solving. Thanks very much, Rebecca. So, the final category is demonstration of exemplary leadership. We have two honorable mentions here, both who are in the room. To my right, Mike Major, our manager of the EDC's policy unit. He was nominated by all the staff in his group, so I don't know what he's doing with his staff that have achieved that, but it's successful. And Larissa Deneau, a relatively newcomer to the city, who's done a terrific job running our policy unit. The winning staff is Marilyn Nickel. Not here. Marilyn's not here. She runs her marketing and communications unit at a meeting. She's out writing some copy. Marilyn exudes a natural tendency towards leadership, innovation, and creative thinking, exceptional customer experience, and relationship building. She is a well-respected member of our leadership team, always goes over and above, and most importantly, takes the time to develop her team, and they think the world of her. She leads with her heart and her smarts while never missing a beat. So thank you very much, Marilyn. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, DCM. Thank you, Committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams, and may I, on behalf of the committee, congratulate all the staff, the winners. Every one of you are winners. We are very fortunate to have your talent and your expertise at the readiness to help all the residents in the City of Toronto. We are very thankful and grateful for the work that you do on a daily basis. So again, thank you very much.
Mr. Motion to receive.
And may I just move a motion to receive the presentation? All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you very much. That's carried. Okay, members, moving right along. I know we're mindful of time. I know members have a variety of things to do. We've got a number of presenters and so on. I traditionally like to do an overview of our strategic direction and the initiatives that are driving this committee. And so I will now take that opportunity in order to advance my presentation with respect to moving forward in 2017 for this committee. Last year, this committee agreed to 5 priorities for the city's economic development effort over the 2015-2018 period. I would now like to take a few minutes to review our progress. One of our priorities was to upgrade the city's process. As you would expect in a city of this size, with the processes spanning multiple divisions, this is a long-term effort, and we are nowhere near completion. But I will say on the plus side, collaboration among divisions is growing, and there is a general understanding that system reforms is essential. However, the system reforms are not only requires will, it requires as well investment and resources. Unless a city finds the money to invest in more productive technology and significant process changes, progress towards this priority will continue to be slow. Another economic development priority is to boost organic growth. This means to grow the city's current businesses, to start new ones. We can report encouraging progress on this front. Economic Development Division is actively working with a number of local businesses to help them expand their operations. The division has also sharpened its focus on entrepreneurship, increasing its ability to help startups get up and running, and also helping small businesses to grow. These efforts and a robust toolbox of employment-oriented initiatives launched by Toronto Employment and Social Services and Economic Development and Cultural Division has in fact contributed to employment growth in the City of Toronto of some 40,000 jobs over the last year. The performance metrics in the Toronto Economic Bulletin submitted to this committee in item ED 17.11 indicates that the overall economic trend in Toronto are encouraging. Another priority is to launch the Export Trade Initiative. We have made substantial strides over the past 2 years in laying the groundwork for expanded trade opportunities for Toronto businesses. The city has gone around the world to establish international relationships with governments, trade organizations, and businesses, and that opens new pathway to trade. In 2016, Mayor Tory led a trade mission to Los Angeles, San Francisco, Asia, Israel. There's been trade missions led to Vietnam, China, and I met with potential trade partners and government officials in Europe, Asia, and most recently Latin America. Visiting these markets enables us to connect with channel partners such as industry associations, government officials, private sector partners. Our willingness to commit the time and effort to meet face-to-face with officials in these markets demonstrates Toronto's commitment to building long-term relationships and is paving the way to the establishment of formal international trade arrangements involving Toronto and our businesses. Our timing for these missions could not be better. The Canada-European Trade Agreement is opening new pathways to trade with Europe. The uncertainty created by Brexit and the unsettling messages coming from the President-elect in the U.S. regarding international trade agreements, renewed protectionism, and also import tariffs have caused companies in many nations to look for more stable markets to do business. This makes Canada a very attractive place. Mexico is looking for a new friend beyond the U.S., and Canada is, in my view, well positioned. Many companies in South America are nervous about the new U.S. trade policies and sees Canada as a good nearshore location to diversify their investments. Most recently, we were in Mexico City and Monterrey. We had meetings with some of the leading business leaders there and government officials. They have, in fact, validated this particular perspective. I was accompanied by George Spezza, from our Director of Business Services and Retention. We are, in fact, capitalizing on the opening that this uncertainty has created. Our trade missions last year enabled the City of Toronto to sign a number of memorandum of agreement in places such as Dubai, Sao Paulo, Hong Kong, Rio de Janeiro. We have signed as well Mexico, and there are others in progress. In total, we have identified over $10 billion in potential economic opportunities for Toronto companies in the food sector, pharmaceutical, the IT, water, wastewater, infrastructure, and innovation. For 2017's mission, these missions are planned for Los Angeles, Cleveland, the United States, other areas in the United States, Dubai, Sri Lanka, and India. In the third quarter, Mayor Tory will lead a follow-up mission to South America, building on the success of our earlier trip and expanding our reach into Latin America. The goal of these missions is to build relationship and find opportunities in international markets that Toronto companies can exploit to increase their sales. Ladies and gentlemen, it's important to understand that export means growth. Facilities will be expanded as a result of the new demand and so on. And of course, new jobs will be created for residents in Toronto. Hand in hand with our trade initiative is our next priority, transforming our approach to foreign direct investment. Our plan in this area is to consolidate FDI marketing by replacing Invest Toronto, that I currently chair, with a new, better-funded regional entity serving the GTA. And this entity will be funded by the federal government, it will be funded by the provincial government, and all the other 28 municipalities that makes up the group in this GTA. And in fact, the City of Toronto, who now provides funding of $2.5 million to Invest Toronto, will contribute a significant less, but in fact, we will have more funds to expand and create opportunities in the region. This entity will have a broader reach than Invest Toronto and is expected to identify more investment prospect for Toronto as well as our regional partners. I wanted to reiterate the fact that we're not competing against Mississauga, Brampton, and the surrounding municipalities. We are competing in a global marketplace. We're competing with major cities around the world, major regions around the world. They're consolidating themselves, and we have actually now come late to the dance. But I think we need to dance well because we're good dancers and we will perform well in this particular space. It is a requirement that if we ought to grow the opportunity in our community, in our cities, that we take a new approach in terms of how we do business. Let me be very clear. We will get critics. There will be those who tell us we are on junkets and we're spending money frivolously and foolishly. I can tell those individuals that they really need to understand what is happening globally and basically take the blinders off that they're wearing and expand their views. The myopic set way of looking at things and doing things, it's over. In this city, we are no longer going to be second class to anybody. We're going to be part of a world-class, first place about excellence that we are going to strive for in our community, in our city, because we've got the talent, we've got the ability to do this, and so we are not going to sit idly by where there's opportunities for us to succeed and compete globally. We are on our game and we're ready to compete. Thank you, Councillor. Thank you. After a few procedural delays, the new agency, to be called Toronto Global, will be launched this month. It will be chaired by Mark Cohon, and I'm very happy that Mark is leading this as the chair. Toby Lennox is the acting CEO of this organization, and they're all doing a great job in terms of putting the finishing touches together. Toronto Global will, in fact, take on the heavy lifting of lead generations and international marketing, enabling the City of Toronto to concentrate on the targeting requirement and on the ability to close those investment deals that is required in this space. The impact of Toronto Global should become apparent in the next coming months. The final priority this committee is established for 2015 to 2018 is to act proactively. In 2016, Economic Development took the initiative in promoting entrepreneurship by establishing a Toronto startup ecosystem strategy. This strategy emphasizes collaboration and Economic Development has in fact worked closely with Toronto's community of business incubators to encourage and nurture the formation of new businesses. The city is also seeking to learn from the best. Our missions that's been led by Mayor Tory to Silicon Valley and Israel enables us to establish collaborative relationship with leaders in the world's two most successful high-tech startup incubators. Youth employment is also a priority that needs a proactive approach. At this committee last November, we received a report titled Youth Employment Action Plan from the Youth Action Plan Advisory Committee on work-based learning for young people in Toronto. And I want to congratulate Patricia Walcott and her team in leading this, as well as the members of the advisory committee for the great work that they've done. The committee brought together leaders representing a cross-section of stakeholders to advance the city's work-based learning strategy. The collaborative effort like this are in fact helpful, and in fact we will be mobilizing a cross-sectoral partnership to get young people working together. Proactive also described our approach to international trade. In the months ahead, economic development staff will begin reaching out to local businesses and coordinating sector-specific roundtables to have discussions. These initiatives will connect Toronto companies to opportunities in pharma, food and beverages, green technologies, and other sectors identified as a result of our trade missions. Staff will also begin to organize strategic international selling missions that will take Toronto's export-minded local companies to international cities where the opportunities in fact lies. Our companies will be able to leverage our contacts in these markets to build partnership and expand their export businesses. On the cultural front, the city will be proactive in celebrating and capitalizing on Canada's 150th birthday. Canada 150 had a terrific kickoff event here at Nathan Phillips Square on December 31st, and events and activities are actually planned for across the city for the year coming. I had the pleasure of being here and saw thousands of people when we spoke. The Lieutenant Governor was here, Steve Laforme was here as well, and Adam Vaughan, MP, was here to speak and welcome all the people who came to the square to start the celebration and, of course, to bring in the new year. These events that will take place includes, and I will just highlight a few. There's going to be a 4-day celebration here at Nathan Phillips Square. It's going to be a variety of music performers and so on, many of them local artists. This will take place starting on the 30th of June and extending to the 3rd of July. And there will also be other locations. Other civic centers will be having events as well across the city. There'll be a celebration of National Aboriginal Day, a special Canada 150 programming that will take place throughout the year in our museum. Looking forward to seeing that as well. And in addition, Canada 150, there'll be a branded Doors Open event as well as Nuit Blanche event. These activities will help us as a city and celebrate our city and country and draw visitors to the city, and in my view instilled a sense of energy in our museum and cultural scene that is extremely important for the city's cultural sector. They will also have, in fact, a meaningful economic impact on both our arts and cultural sector, and dare I say, the tourism sector as well. This will be a great opportunity for the tourism area. Establishing performance matrix for Toronto's economic development effort has been an ongoing process, hampered, of course, by the lack of adequate informational system resources that we have available to us. And that's why I mentioned earlier on, we need to ensure that we can invest in these systems that we need to help us to be able to manage, be able to track things and so on. I believe that there's a need for a robust customer resource management system. that will be essential to help us to be able to track our local enterprises and to build the data platform we need to anticipate their needs and to help them to maximize their business potential. The division has been working on such a solution and plans to present its recommendations to us as a committee in the months ahead. It is, in my view, critical that we implement a CRM system this year if we are to capture the growth and trade opportunities that are now coming our way. Equally urgent is maintaining our momentum in turning Toronto into a model smart city. Toronto is an emerging leader in the smart cities technology, and it is essential that we incorporate the most productive technologies into our municipal government structure. I had some meetings yesterday with a number of companies who are in this space, and I'm actually very excited about the opportunities, and I've discussed it with Councillor Holland, and we are going to be working with members of the committee and others and so on to make these things happen. It is also vital that we collaborate with the private sector in the development of leading-edge smart city innovation. Mayor Tory has, in fact, acknowledged the importance of staying on top of emerging technologies. And, in fact, he has done so by appointing Councillor Michelle Holland as the Mayor's advocate for innovation technology. The innovation advocate role is a crucial one, in my view, as the city faces a new era of autonomous vehicles and other innovations that promises to revolutionize how we design our cities, how we build our houses, and how we operate as a city. And so I know that Councillor Holland has been working at this for some time, and I would like to ask her if at this particular point in time she'd like to say a few words about her role and about how she is going to be working with this committee and in council and staff in the coming months in order to help us to effectively implement the Mayor's vision and your vision, Councillor Holland. So I wonder if you could give us a few words, Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to thank you so much for highlighting that and bringing that out, and thank the Mayor for creating that role. I've been working on it as well for the past few years, and with you actually working on so many motions and bringing that out. So I'm actually thrilled, so thrilled about the role. I can wake up every morning and say I have the best job at the City of Toronto, but I know everybody has their own role and loves what they do, but I'm so excited about it, and I'm so excited that it's on economic development. So it's my first time being on the committee, so I'm really excited to be working with the committee, working with the chair, and working with all of the amazing and talented staff. So I've been already working with Mike Williams and others that are within economic development, and we just have such amazing talent here. So I'm going to be looking forward to working together with you and with all of staff on moving this agenda forward. And so a few of the areas that we're going to be looking at is, number one is obviously employment. So as policymakers, regulators, politicians, we're always a little bit nervous when it comes to disruption and what that can do on the jobs and with employment and with skills. So we want to make sure that we're in a proactive position and not reactive, as what we saw with Uber and the whole taxi debate. And we were very nervous about not only the regulatory system, but also how that affected many residents. I'll even speak for my own ward that are taxi drivers. What do we do? And you know, it's something that I noticed at the time, that coming out with the driverless vehicle, it really isn't and really wasn't a debate about taxi drivers versus Uber drivers. It was really about the driverless car, because that's what's going to disrupt in the very, very near future. And I know people talk about 10 years out, but it's already on the road. We know Stratford. I met with the mayor this week and had a lovely dinner with him and catching up on everything that they're doing in Stratford and how they've already outfitted their system to be ready for the autonomous vehicle. And that's where the pilot is, and the province has poured money into that city, which is brilliant, because I think that's the right size of a city. I don't think that we could be doing that here, and we shouldn't be running those pilots. We have enough gridlock as it is. So that's probably not the right space. But again, these are the initiatives that we have to be looking at and making sure that if it's the driverless vehicle and we're looking at, for example, our bus system, or our transit system, TTC on the forefront in making sure that they're ready and preparing our staff, our TTC drivers? Are we preparing them for the next economy, for this new economy, and making sure that we're redeploying them and building those skills? And I think it is incumbent upon us as a public sector to make sure that we're providing those skills. So that's one whole aspect, is employment, and I could go on and on about that, but I really think that the new economy isn't anything to be afraid of. I think that we should be extremely excited about it. It's going to create, and it has been creating millions and millions of jobs, and it's something that we can be proud of and look forward to. So that's one aspect. Number two is just identifying the problems, as we know, even within our own domain, within our own public sector. So we know all of our divisions and our departments, and we can probably identify a few problems within each one that we want to rectify and that we want to improve. And we can easily do that by working with the private sector on either through the important RFP process, but making sure that we're upgrading and upgrading our skills and upgrading our technology to make sure that we're on the cutting edge instead of in a reactionary position. So the third area I'll mention, I know the mayor has mentioned this, and as you know, I'm also chair with this guy right here on the corporation's nominating panel, which I've been also thrilled about. I'd say I have the two best jobs at the city, but I've been moving the dial on gender diversity on our boards as well, and looking to do the same within the tech sector. And as with the chair was mentioning, I've met with so many amazing, talented startups and incubators and scaled businesses and major businesses, and hopefully we'll get a few unicorns back in the city aside from BlackBerry. But we want to make sure that women are involved as well. And as we go out, and the mayor's mentioned this as well, we don't see as many women when we're going out, and we want to increase that. And there's a plethora of talented, amazing women, as we see when they apply to our board. So some people say, well, there just isn't as many women applying, which is completely not true whatsoever. As we know, when we get the resumes, I can say for sure there's absolute talent, equivalent talent out there. It's just making sure that we are moving the dial forward on that. So finally, as Councillor Thompson mentioned, Toronto is an amazing city, and I'm not sure if we want to be creating ourselves as Silicon Valley of the North. I don't think we need to do a repeat. I think that we can actually be larger than that. We are larger than that. It's almost like putting New York with Silicon Valley together. So we have multiculturalism, we have major media and television and the music scene, and we have amazing cuisine and multiculturalism. So there's so many aspects that we already know with Toronto, and Silicon Valley is not known for that. So I don't think we need to say that we're Silicon Valley of the North, but we definitely need to beat our own drum much more, because we're leading in startups. We're leading in so many areas of technology and innovation that we can beat our own drum. And if we become a super cluster with Waterloo, even better. I think, just like the Bay Area, that we don't want to cut anybody out, but we want to enhance that. But for sure, Toronto dominates, and we are even larger than what Waterloo is. So I'll just wrap up with that and say I'm really excited to look forward to working with staff and with everybody here and with the committee on advancing this role. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Holland, and look forward to working with you. And we're good. Thank you, Mayor. We look forward to the exciting times that are ahead, because I know Councillor Grimes has got his sleeves already rolled up. Councillor Kelly is all ready to go, and we're looking at moving ahead in a terrific way in collaboration with our staff team. So thank you very much. The Economic Development and Cultural Division has established a plan for 2017 that includes 3 specific goals. 1, building a vibrant cultural scene. 2, competing in the global market. And 3, fostering an inclusive economy. I would now like to ask the General Manager, Mike Williams, to give us a brief overview as to how the division plans to pursue these goals, and maybe also ask the Deputy City Manager if she wishes to maybe make any comments before Mr. Williams or after. It's your prerogative. Okay, thank you. Mr. Williams, you have the floor.
Sure, and maybe Pat can jump in on some of the employment aspects.
I was going to get to that,
Good.
but thank you. Thank you.
I think the key, I'm going to move from right to left on the slide. The first thing on inclusive local economy, and Councillor Holland's already talked about a number of elements of that. I would also like to add the geographic element to it, which is we have a very vibrant and I think virtuous circle of growth and prosperity and investment in the downtown core, but that doesn't extend as far as it should across the whole city. And so a lot of the focus of our entrepreneurship and a number of the other programs will be on trying to assist and promote job growth in Etobicoke, North York, and Scarborough, specifically to help the youth in those areas, to help the people being affected by employment pattern changes, which Councillor Holland's also referred to, not only AV, but artificial intelligence, blockchain. There are a lot of technologies that are coming into daily use that could have very dramatic impacts on the workforce, and maybe Pat will pick up on that in a second. Competing in the global market, we have two big initiatives this year. With the launch of Toronto Global finally this month, working with them and building on that will be a significant shift in some ways, although we already work with an arm's length agency in Invest Toronto, so we have a history of that already. But the other one, and it was tabled at the Budget Committee yesterday, a significant expansion of the international trade strategy and our international relations in conjunction with the protocol office in the clerk's office. So those are the two main focuses there. There are huge upsides to both of those, with potentially doubling the number of foreign investment projects in Toronto every year compared to what we've been able to afford to promote up until now. And then a huge opportunity if our exports catch, which I agree with the chair, obviously, that with all the things going on right now, this is the time to jump in with both feet, in my view, to boost that. Every $100,000 of export growth there's a job created. It's going to be one of our main job creation elements. We have, looks like a stable dollar that is competitive in the world marketplace, and that will also help. And then finally, on the vibrant cultural scene, taking advantage of the Canada 150 on a number of fronts. I wanted to mention, one is just celebrating a very successful country over the last 150 years, commemorating some of the key things that happened during that time frame. And we have Vimy Ridge commemoration coming up in April, one of the most fundamental nation-building events, tragic events in some ways, but also very positive in building a country that can stand on its own 2 feet rather than always being under the coattails of England. And then, but the other aspect of it is that there are other elements of our history that we aren't as proud of. And so we have focus on our First Peoples and the Indigenous. We have the North American Indigenous Games here this year. Hopefully we can work with the Walk for Reconciliation, but to move on, to make some significant, meaningful moves in that front would be a huge accomplishment in Canada's 150 if we could do that. So, Mr. Chair, that's my highlights. I don't know if Pat, or I don't know how you want to do this, but...
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Yeah.
Appreciate your presentation. And I'd like to now ask Ms. Walcott to just give us a brief overview on plans for her division, her area in the next, for the next, I guess, 11 months.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. First of all, I want to thank everyone for the opportunity for the partnership with this committee and with the Economic Development and Culture Division. I think it's been hugely advantageous for us in terms of making sure that all of our citizens can capitalize on the prosperity that is in Toronto. I think that Toronto Employment and Social Services has an advantage in that we have a huge footprint within the City of Toronto. We are located in every community, communities that are extremely diverse and that can benefit from our assistance. So our job is very much trying to link people with the prosperity that is to come. And that is very much speaks to the priority around an inclusive local economy. So that is our major focus within the division. And certainly also taking advantage of the vibrant cultural scene. Because often these same groups that are not prospering at the same pace as other citizens are not taking advantage of the cultural opportunities as well. And certainly businesses that are coming into Toronto can be connected, and we can work with all of our groups, all of our citizens, to connect them with the opportunities that are presented. So thank you very much, appreciate the partnerships that we have developed, and I'm very hopeful for the year 2017.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wolcott. And I'd like to turn it over now to the DCM.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of the committee members. I think you can get a glimpse just by the two divisions, the two GMs that have spoken to you, that our Cluster A, the Human and Social Services Cluster, is very committed to working together, to working with council, with our businesses and our residents, the other orders of government, to ensure that we work together and leverage our resources, our strengths, our talents, to help continue to grow the city, to continue to ensure that it is a vibrant, prosperous, livable, and successful city that all residents can participate in and, as Pat said, capitalize from. So we're looking forward to this year and in the longer term in continuing to work in partnership with all of you and with all our businesses and residents to continue down that path.
Great, thank you very much. I just wanted to make a point before we conclude this particular matter. We have two documents that has served as our blueprint for success to date, and I've always maintained since taking this position that unless we actually have a plan, we can't be effective in terms of executing anything. So we have had a plan that we've been working towards, and I would say that these plans have been very helpful to us. One is the capital gains on the cultural report, and the other is the Toronto Prosperity Agenda. And so these plans have worked effectively, have helped us. However, we're now in 2017. Both these plans were constructed in 2011, and I think that there's a need now, time is right for a refresher. I want to suggest that we look at reviewing and how we modernize obviously these plans to effectively take advantage of what we have talked about here today. And maybe I'll just ask the General Manager, perhaps if you could give us maybe your thoughts on establishing a timeline process in terms of helping us with this undertaking. I can tell you now, though, with respect to your timeline, if this report's not ready by September, you're in trouble.
Well, I guess I don't have to talk about that part of the question. I agree. We will meet that timetable. There's been a lot of work, even since those plans that you described, and from 2011, we've put in place a music strategy. We're working on a film strategy. We have an entrepreneurship strategy that we've brought to committee. So I think we can build on a lot of work which will short-circuit the time required. Rather than going back and starting from scratch, we'll build on the programs and plans that are already in place. We link in with the city's strategic actions. We link in with Working as One, which is Tessa's strategic plan. So I think that with appropriate consultation, working with committee members, we can achieve a new strategy to help guide for the next 4 or 5 years as well. So we'll have that to you at the very, very latest in September.
Fantastic. Looking forward to working with you, all members, I'm sure, and members of the team. Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. And I'd like to simply move receipt of this particular item. So 18.3, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Moving right along, and I want to thank the presenters for just waiting. We are now moving to ED 18.4. I had made reference before that Mary Webb, who is the Director, Economic and Fiscal Policy with Scotiabank Economics, is here, and she'll be making a presentation giving us an overview in terms of the outlook for Toronto, Ontario, and Canada. And I'd just like to read the brief information I have here about Ms. Webb. It says that beyond Mary's broad involvement in Canada and the U.S. forecasts, she's also responsible for policy analysis, focusing on Canada and U.S. federal, provincial, and state governments, and also related global fiscal governments or development. Mary has more than 3 decades of experience analyzing North American trend as an economist and as a consultant. And Mary, we can't wait, because I know that we're looking forward to you for inspiration in light of the conditions that are prevailing in North America. So you're timely, and we welcome you to our committee. Is the mic on?
Around the world, no.
Is the mic on? Okay.
There we go.
Okay, thanks.
I'm actually, though, guardedly optimistic about Toronto's prospects. And that is in part because we have a stronger global forecast entering this year. Now, I should caution you that economists tend to be optimistic in January, and then this fades as we work through the remainder of the year. But I think we are seeing some of the emerging economies regain traction. We look for China's growth probably to stay at 6 or above over the next 2 years. And for the U.S., we actually are looking for growth this year and next to move towards 2.5%. That's important. Ontario and Toronto are still very dependent on the U.S., and the recovery in business investment and consumer goods is very positive for not just our tourism industry, but for all our exports of goods and services. We still have about an 80% dependence on the U.S. market in terms of international receipts in this province. For Ontario, we're looking for some 2.6% growth last year to slow to about 2.3%. And the first graph that I have put up there is actually employment, just because it tends to be more timely than our real GDP. So we're showing 3 years. 2014 is the light green, 15 is the dark green, 16 is the outline. And yes, creating 40,000 new jobs in the city is an accolade. But you'll see that the Toronto CMA has been above. In fact, in this post-recession recovery, its annual growth has been 1.9%. And that's stronger than Canada at 1.2 and Ontario. So this is a strong position to be moving forward in. Why the strength? Well, part of it, I think, is in services. So I've chosen the next 5 slides to indicate why I would be cautiously optimistic, even with the election of Trump south of the border, and therefore our significant uncertainty on what is happening in terms of policy. The first slide's WTI oil, that's the dashed line, and then the Canadian dollar, which is the red line. We're looking for WTI oil to strengthen to 58 this year on average and move to 61 next year. And that's, of course, from a low that actually kept broaching $40 not that long ago. But we're likely to stay in the $60 range. And that's a big advantage for Toronto because you're net energy consumers. And therefore, it's going to be a significant offset to other factors that are going to raise energy prices, such as the cap and trade. On the dollar, we're looking for the dollar to be below 75 cents this year on average, and then next year moving towards 76, 77 cents. It's a real opportunity. Toronto's already an extremely diversified economy, but as you grow industries, this dollar gives them a chance to really gain traction, so that when the dollar does move back above 80 cents, they have a competitive position that they've developed. Manufacturing is still 10% of your employment, but I would really emphasize services here. And you have been. I'm really encouraged to see the innovation and the emphasis there. I'd also, it may sound a tad self-serving since I'm from the Scotiabank, but financial services. And they've been growing the employment has been over 5% annually in the last 4 years. The real growth has been 4%. And there's an entrepreneurial network, but there's also a large corporate network. And Toronto is a global city and a global financial center. And that financial plays into the extreme high-tech development, also plays into the professional development in Toronto, and that is an extremely strong source of growth going forward. Will it be easy? Well, no. It's extremely important for Canada that Toronto succeed. We're rebalancing here. No longer can we expect in Canada that oil and gas and the rest of our resources are going to fund some 50 to 60% of our investment and earnings. They're not. And since we've moved beyond this commodity price boom, we're looking for non-energy industries to carry much more of the growth momentum in Canada going forward. And Toronto and the whole Greater Toronto area will be absolutely key in that. Because we are a transitioning economy, we look for the Bank of Canada to actually be quite reticent about raising rates. We're not looking for a rate cut either this year or next, but we don't see the Bank of Canada moving till the end of the middle to end of 2018 with a rate increase. In contrast, we think that there will be 3 rate increases in the U.S. after the December hike in the Fed funds rate, and a further 2 in 2018. So that their administered rate goes to 2%, whereas ours is just starting to move off 0.5 percentage point. And that's one reason why we think the dollar will stay low, even with oil prices recovering. Because we have this historically very unusual period of the U.S. raising rates when we're not. Will we be pulled along? Yes, I think we will see some gradual appreciation in our longer-term rates. 5-year money, for example, has been just over closed 2016, just over 1%. I think it'll be starting to push 1.5% by the end of this year, pushing 2% by the end of 2018. But that's still historically very, very low. I mean, we're still looking for 30-year money at the end of next year to be less than 3%. So this is an extremely favorable time for businesses to invest. And it's also a very favorable time for us to be doing this infrastructure investment. That right now, we will not have another opportunity probably in our lifetimes to take advantage given the underlying cost of capital. One of the reasons that Canadian rates stay so low is that there will be, as you can see from the graph, the dotted line is the U.S., that there's a very significant spread. And it's because Canada is restructuring that we do have lower growth prospects right now than the States. We'll be around 2%, about 0.4% behind, and lower inflation prospects. So then we turn to the housing market, the very buoyant housing market right now in the Toronto area. As oil prices corrected, we've seen a rebalancing in growth, and that's extremely important for Toronto. So we're at the stage now for Ontario where we've returned to positive net interprovincial migration, and a significant portion of that is coming to Toronto. That's the first time since 2002, and it's because we're not seeing the huge outflows to Alberta. Similarly, on immigration, we have moved back in Ontario over 100,000, and that's also important. So when I look at housing, I like to look at the balance in the housing market and then where the household indebtedness is. On the balance, I'm not that concerned. I think we're slowly working out of a significant surge in multi-unit construction. I think that we'll continue to see multi-unit, that's 70% of our housing starts and probably still climbing. But we've really run down the inventory of completed and unoccupied units. And that indicates a balance given the employment growth and the population growth that we're looking for Toronto. In terms of household indebtedness, well, households are stretched. And I put the Toronto prices on the same graph as BC. Perhaps misery likes company, and we certainly don't have the prices yet that BC has. But we have seen a significant ramping up, and the current pace is 20% year over year. And therefore, even next year, I think that the recent finance regulations, that the regulations we saw last fall from OSFI are going to cause some slowing in terms of housing demand, that will gradually correct what we're seeing. But nevertheless, I still think we're looking at a further price increase next year this year that's 5 to 10%. And it builds on the 20%. And so keeping our other costs in line becomes extremely important. And it's important because not just of affordability and livability in this city that we love, but it's also important in terms of competitiveness. We can't let the cost of operating get out of line in terms of individuals wanting to live here and in terms of businesses that want to locate here and, importantly, expand here. And part of that livability we are addressing. So I'm encouraged by the infrastructure. It's ambitious. It's ambitious at the federal level, and that's the slide that I've shown you there. And so Ottawa is looking to raise infrastructure spending from some $8.2 billion in 2016, basically more than doubling it by 2019. Ontario is almost as ambitious. They're looking for a 30% increase in infrastructure, and much of that is right here in Toronto. And therefore, the challenges are there. How do we afford it? How do we operate it? How do we maintain it? But is it essential moving forward? Yes, it is, in terms of moving both goods and people. And we're seeing the huge flows of people through this city. And the Toronto Airport is a very good example. They had 8% growth in passengers is what they're estimating for this year. This is really positive for our city, and it will certainly be further encouraged by the soft dollar. But we have to have a good way to move all these people and to move these goods and to keep the goods movement separate from the people's movement. To recap, I don't think for a minute that you can underplay the challenge. In many of the industries that Toronto's competing in, there's global overcapacity. And therefore, there will always be pricing pressure on our companies. And that limits the profit margins, keeps them constantly looking for savings and where they can build new products, new innovation, new technology to stay ahead of the global competition. But many of the directions that I just heard from your chair, I think are really encouraging. I certainly agree on the international focus. In some ways, if Trump does move, and we find that there's more protectionism that we are facing in the U.S. market, this might just force us to move more aggressively abroad. Ontario's been pretty slow at that compared to other provinces. You know, we still have some 5% of our international export receipts from Asia. Should be more like 10 or 20. So I think that there's opportunity here as well as challenge. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Webb. We do have a couple of questions for you. I'll start with Councillor Holland first. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks so much for your presentation. It was a great update, especially on the housing market, which obviously we've been following very closely, and I went to a C.D. Howe Institute roundtable with the panel recently on this particular issue, just right after Vancouver implemented their strategy to sort of curb those speculators and foreign investment. So what's the percentage of speculators in the market at this point?
You know, we don't know. And
There's ideas, I guess.
I'm answering quite honestly. We have, probably the firmest number we have is that about a third of our condos appear to be rented. Now, that can be for various reasons, but obviously that is indicating. Is that necessarily a bad thing? No, because we have pulled back on the rental units, and therefore we do need that rental component, and particularly in our city where you might have a worker moving here for a year to get training or whatever, that's exactly the type of stature we want, and therefore we need a vibrant rental market. I was extremely encouraged by Ontario moving forward to start getting the international identity of our purchasers. We haven't had that information, either residentially or non-residentially. And I consider the competitive concern about non-residential land prices to also be very critical to the city. If we don't have that information, how can we tell how much of a problem we have? And much of the anecdotal and the survey information, while very interesting and often brings forward some interesting details, unless we actually make it a condition of a property transfer to declare a person or a trust or a corporation citizenship, we won't know. So Ontario is finally putting that in place, and it's key. And until we start getting that actual information in terms of whether we should be moving more definitively, so Ontario did move a bit that way in terms of limiting some of our assistance to that you have to be a Canadian citizen or have been living here. They're limiting it and excluding non-residents. But if we wish to more definitively, we need to have the data first.
Okay. And, sorry, and what is your I was just reading the article yesterday on the stability of the housing market. They're seeing that it's not going to be as, I'd say, as unpredictable, or it's a little bit more stable this year. I think the prediction is for 2017.
Yes, that's more stable, and I actually think that starts could begin to stabilize and edge lower. They will be more resilient than starts in the rest of the province this year and next. In terms of, we currently have a situation where our listings have fallen off very significantly. So when I'm thinking of the resale market, that's always a sign for concern. The market isn't functioning properly unless we have listings coming forward on a very regular basis, and therefore the sales to listings ratio is staying at healthy levels. Right now, that ratio is suffering because the listings have fallen off so much. So you're not having the move-up activity and that activity. That's a concern, and so the stability of the market is going to be extremely important in putting this ratio back on a healthier track. So when you say on the starts, I agree. On the pricing, just concerned that the listings are historically low, and therefore I'm hoping that the increase in prices decelerates to 5 to 10%. Hoping's probably should be right there beside my forecasting.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Holland. Councillor Grimes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mary, for your presentation. You mentioned our soft dollar. It was your soft dollar. Where does Scotiabank see our dollar kind of fit in a very comfortable zone for us? So I own a large company that we export hundreds of millions of dollars to the States, and we bring in, we're a transportation logistic company. We kind of like the dollar where it is sitting now because the Americans are buying off our customers and our trucks are getting out, and then, they're getting home because they get out and they're coming home. So we kind of like the dollar because it's an advantage. So with, the unknown of Trump, if he's putting in a tariff, whatever it is, so you mentioned the dollar from 74 to 77, would that not probably pick up anything he would add to the tariff? Would that not be a comfort zone for us, our dollar here?
I think what will eventually take our dollar back up to the 80, through 80 cents, and I would look for that in 2019, is the fact that Canada will be regaining traction both on the resource side, although much more modestly than they had operated back in 2013-14, and that we still have the non-energy expanding as well. And therefore, our growth prospects will be acknowledged. We will have gotten through a lot of this infrastructure that provides a floor, and therefore, there will be the recognition, and as well, we will be bumping into, we don't look for the Canada's output gap to be closed until the first half of next year. By 2019, it will be closed and we'll be operating above that output gap, and therefore you'll see the Bank of Canada hiking rates, and so the combination of rates and an oil price that's somewhere in the 60 to 70 range will take our dollar back to 80, 85.
Yeah, so I'm saying, is it not to advantage having our dollar down in where it is around now?
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
on the other, I know Mike Williams has worked on this, having Kraft, Mr. Christie's in our ward, and Campbell Soups. These companies that have plants in the U.S. are also competing against each other. We saw that when the Kraft plant, Mr. Christie's closed, some of the jobs went to the U.S. So it's important for that dollar to kind of be below so we can compete with some of the plants in Chicago or wherever they are in Ohio.
It is, but it's also really important that we take the additional profit that we're getting from that soft dollar and be investing it in the new technology.
Into our plants here.
In our plants here.
That's
And
great.
that technology, it's not just, it's the machinery and equipment, but it's all the new innovation that comes with the machinery and equipment and what you do with your processes, et cetera. So that's why this soft dollar is definitely an opportunity here.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mary, you didn't talk a little bit about this, but I just wonder if I can sort of maybe digress a little bit from your presentation, ask you about incentives as an opportunity in terms of attracting business, your thoughts on that. Many U.S. cities, for example, are offering land, a variety of tax breaks and so on. We have what's called IMET here principally. We don't offer land, we don't give oodles of money for people to relocate and things like that, but we do talk about our competitive advantages, our diversity, level of education, a skill set, on all of those elements. I'm just wondering, and the reason why I ask you the question, because oftentimes I get, what are the incentives that you could offer us in Toronto, where I can go to Pittsburgh, I can go to Allegheny, I can go all these different places, set up a plant, get a facility, or in fact, I can go to Mexico and get free land, 30 years or 40 years, tax-free and so on. I'm just wondering your thoughts on that. How do we ensure that we maintain that competitive edge, if you will, with those sort of, I would call it distraction?
It's a real distraction.
Yeah.
And it's a long-standing, and the convincing argument you want to make is, long-term, we're going to stay competitive here in Toronto.
Right.
And we're likely not to return to parity on the dollar, and we have a safe, secure environment that often cannot be replicated.
Right.
But there's some advantages that we now have that we didn't have a half decade ago. We're now working much more closely with our community colleges to tailor education programs. So I think that we can offer perhaps more soft incentives. If you're bringing in a new operation and you need some training, well, we'll be there for you. Here's a couple of our community colleges, and we set that up. The idea that we're going to have a more coordinated approach to our development, I think, is really key. And then the whole idea of having a support team, and in terms of that, the banks are there. That small business and whatever, we will act as part of a support team.
Great. Thank you very much, Mary. Thank you. There are no further questions. I simply wanted to thank you on behalf of this committee for the excellent presentation. It's very helpful, the things that you've stated, and I think it perhaps reinforces the thought that just because the dollar is at 75 cents doesn't mean that the world's going to cave. Or at those lower numbers doesn't mean the world's going to cave in, and in fact, we need to look at how we can take advantage of the opportunity. So it's keeping in line with respect to our approach, the global approach, looking at internationally competing with respect to our businesses. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
right, folks, I'd like to move receipt of the presentation. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. All right, moving right along, we are now moving... Receipt of information. Is there something wrong?
Motion to receive.
Motion to receive? Yes. I move motion to receive. All right, thank you. All right, so we are now moving to our next item, which is ED 18.5, Canada-European Union Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement, CETA, and experience with negotiation. All right, so we have a number of folks that are here. We have Corrado. Is Corrado here? Okay, fair enough. So we have Mr. Mario Negro is here. Mario, would you please come in? And Georgia, are you coming up as well, Mr. Tonelli? So we'll have you both come forward, and I'll start.
I'm not as sophisticated, but I'll try.
Just make sure your microphone is on.
Okay.
Let me know when you're ready. Thank you very much for coming this morning.
No worries at all.
Appreciate
It's
you.
our pleasure. Thank you. Well, good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Mario.
Your microphone on?
I think it is. I tend
Please.
to talk loud enough that I don't need a microphone, so I might actually turn it off at a certain point for your own well-being and your own health.
Thank you.
But so let's introduce ourselves. My name is Mario Negro. I'm a partner at Stikeman and Elliott, a national Canadian law firm. My practice focuses on inbound and outbound commercial and mergers and acquisitions work. So I see, particularly in the context of trade here in Toronto and both in Canada, with the type of companies that are interested in Canada, what they actually do when they come to Canada, and of course the interaction between investment and what it means for Canadians' daily lives. And I'll let Giorgio make a quick introduction for himself.
Yeah, and thank you, everybody. My name is Giorgio Tinelli, Business Development Officer at the Italian Chamber of Commerce of Ontario. We partner up, of course, with Mario and his law firm, and we've been following, of course, the CETA agreement since the inception, basically, and the early negotiation for obvious reason, because we are a private not-profit organization based here in Toronto, but we also represent Italy, and Italy is one of the countries, of course, of the European Union. So, thank you very much.
So the focus of the presentation today is to provide a few facts about CETA and try to distill the information in a relevant way to understand what potentially could be of benefit or impact, particularly so for the City of Toronto. We'll start more with the general and then move towards a little bit more specific. We're not going to follow the presentation directly. I wouldn't put you through that, but part of it is to give you kind of information to have at your fingertips. It's meant to be a user-friendly presentation, so hopefully we can move quickly and get down to specifics, which I think is where your interest will mostly lie. So just to go through quickly some of the basics, as you see, what is CETA all about? I mean, the reality we call it CETA because it's too long to keep repeating the full name of the trade agreement. What does CETA represent? At the end of the day, CETA represents a potentially prominent new free trade agreement with Canada in what many people will call a progressive trade agreement, for whatever you want to call that term. Progressive in the sense that it is a much, much more advanced, all-encompassing trade agreement than any that Canada has, including, of course, NAFTA. And so if you look at CETA from a Toronto perspective as though you would NAFTA, you'd be making a mistake because CETA goes beyond NAFTA in many ways. So you have to look at CETA as being something different than NAFTA and more all-encompassing than NAFTA. Now, you'll see that pretty quickly when you look at the impacts of CETA. Eliminates most trade barriers, most trade tariffs, which is, of course, what we had with NAFTA. Addresses non-tariff barriers, again, what we had with NAFTA. Access to public contracts in all levels, we don't have that with NAFTA. Streamlines trade and services, again, something much, much more comprehensive than NAFTA. Enhances labor mobility. We had some of that in NAFTA. Actually, CETA goes even further and promotes and protects investment, and we had some of that in NAFTA. So you see a lot of new areas that CETA touches upon. I'm going to follow along. What people notice the most about CETA is the impact on day one, where you will have 98%, this famous number of 98% of all EU tariff lines eliminated on day one. Duty-free access across 99% of all tariff lines, once fully implemented, duty-free access for 100% of industrial goods once CETA is fully implemented. We'll talk a little bit about the end. There's a lot of confusion about what fully implemented means. I think the important information for you to know from an impact point of view is once CETA goes into effect on day one, which we expect will be sometime this spring, and we're hearing May, June, its provisional implementation will mean that those tariffs will fall away on day one. So people hear stories about having to have approval of all the member countries' parliaments of the EU, all relevant, but provisional implementation automatically triggers the tariff elimination. So from an impact point of view, we're not going to be waiting for the 28th country to approve CETA. There are clear and favorable rules of origin, clear and favorable customs and trade facilitation. We're going to talk about this in the context of Toronto in terms of what Toronto's strengths are a little bit later, so I'm not going to spend too much time on those now. You'll come to understand where I think those type of additional benefits of CETA over NAFTA are going to have a beneficial impact for Toronto, given the nature of Toronto's economy. So again, when you look at it from a tariffs point of view, because frankly that's the most noticeable impact and the most immediate impact, you'll know pretty quickly, and the next slide that we have is a breakdown of, well, you know, frankly, from a Toronto point of view, what affects us? What trade tariffs are going to be rid of on day one that will stimulate additional economic investment, either inbound or outbound? And what you probably notice is that food, beverage, and tobacco is the one that has some of the largest tariffs that are going to disappear on day one. And interestingly enough, as we all know, the GTA is a food distribution and production hub, always has been, continues to be today, and frankly, has done very well under NAFTA in terms of being competitive as a food hub. And I highlight that for you particularly because if you're looking from an economic development point of view of where is immediate impact going to take place on CETA, I think you will find that food is going to be one of those areas where there will be a pretty considerable and noticeable impact on economic activity from a local perspective quickly, both from an inbound and an outbound perspective. You'll see also motor vehicle and parts, and given the, you know, the importance of the auto sector, so it's interesting that the first, you know, the two areas that probably have the highest tariffs that are going to be eliminated end up being areas that are very important for both Toronto, GTA, and Ontario generally. So, I'll leave the others to discuss later. I do note that, you know, again, I mean, from a City of Toronto perspective, you look outbound and you look inbound, and obviously from where I sit, practicing law, I look inbound in the sense that I'm, of course, interested in people who want to do economic activity in Canada, regardless of where they come from. I will tell you that there are winners and losers, and so we shouldn't pretend that, you know, it's a windfall. It depends on how you define winning and losing, but the nature of the realities of the marketplace are that from a productivity and efficiency point of view, European companies, particularly in certain industrial, aerospace, automotive sectors, have a higher productivity level. I'm not saying anything that's a surprise to anybody. And as a result, anybody who thinks that the windfall will be simply just greater opportunities for Canadian companies going outbound is probably missing the fact that I think the opportunities are for greater economic trade. I think in certain industries, Europeans are going to have an advantage. But again, for the dual role that the City of Toronto plays as an inbound source and an outbound source, I actually think you're going to see a lot of new inbound economic activity in the industrial sectors. It may not be strictly of a nature of greenfield, but you know, where I'm seeing it already of European companies who are starting to knock on the door, looking for potential acquisitions, looking for, you know, ways to get involved in the marketplace. So we're already starting to see a little bit of it now. I think you're going to see more of it. I think there's opportunities there for the City of Toronto from an inbound point of view. You can't deny it. You can't pretend, well, I'm sorry, I don't want any Canadian companies to be bought. It's just not going to work anymore. That's not what the City of Toronto's role is. So I do think there's a reality check here where you have to structure yourself to appreciate that there's certain both local and Canadian companies are going to be more adversely affected, and other ones that are going to be more advantageous. But more importantly, from an inbound economic development point of view perspective, there are winners and there are losers, and I think it's important for the city to be a part of that and kind of distill that and understand who the winners and losers are and target accordingly. Just to keep going here, so what's important and I look at this from a service point of view for the City of Toronto, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it now, but just to understand, you would be missing some of the benefits of CETA by not understanding the fact that there is an elaborate mechanism set up to deal with the distorting impact of non-tariff barriers so that they can be reduced. Because, of course, as we saw with NAFTA, you can have free trade, but then, of course, local and state governments can, of course, find all kinds of reasons to try to prohibit your ability to actually engage in free trade. And the idea of CETA is to try to minimize that. Now, of course, that has, again, an impact for Toronto in both ways. The ability of creating artificial barriers to trade has been particularly noted in CETA, and it creates opportunities for service sectors in terms of managing those processes. And we'll talk about the service sector and the benefits for Toronto, but it is important to understand that CETA does come with restrictions on the parties and their ability to try to distort trade by these artificial non-tariff barriers. Just as a high level, you'll see again, what does CETA mean for Toronto? At the end of the day, it's pretty obvious when you talk about goods. We've spent the time talking a little bit about tariff elimination and non-tariff, reducing non-tariff barriers. It's pretty obvious that there are some benefits there. I'm going to spend a minute or two talking about, as we go forward, the advantageous benefits of CETA, particularly for Toronto when it comes to services and the service sector, which is, again, one of Toronto's strengths, always has been, continues to be, and frankly is becoming more and more important in terms of the breakdown of Toronto's economy and its position in both Canadian marketplace and global marketplace. CETA itself is unique from NAFTA in that it actually provides for free trade in services. Whole new chapter both for Canada and Europe. Europe has not provided any other country with such an extensive free trade agreement with respect to services. And you might not know this, but Europe in and of itself is the largest importer of services in the world. And so from a Canadian point of view and from a Toronto point of view, this is an opportunity, and I think purposefully it was set up that way to be an opportunity for us, conscious of our expertise in a lot of financial services, engineering services, architectural services. I think the idea was here that we had more to gain in Canada by this than to lose. So we turn to the next slide. You'll see that it facilitates the growth in trade and services. And again, like as I mentioned, all service sectors are subject to CETA. Again, the services play out in two ways, one from the more professional service providers, but also with respect to ensuring that regulatory barriers to services don't become impediments just by their nature. And so the focus on CETA is going to be essentially to provide Canada with a MFN treatment. So if by any chance Europe or Canada tries to create some kind of barrier to services related to some internal politics or internal dynamic, we get the advantage or they get the advantage of that same level. So it's pretty comprehensive. It's unprecedented. I think it's an opportunity. I just quickly bring up another point, given the nature of Toronto's demographics and its economic base from a human capital point of view. CETA is going to encourage the movement of people. It is a little bit more elaborate than NAFTA in terms of its benefits for the movement of people, which I think, given Toronto's the nature of Toronto's economy and people do want to come here, and I think you'll find it beneficial from a Toronto point of view to see the temporary entry provisions for CETA are broad, and they actually do encourage facilitation between Canadian and European businesses, which is great, more so even than NAFTA does. It creates greater predictability and stability for investment. There's a lot of controversies about the investor protection provisions. I think they're probably going to go through some tweaks and changes. I'm not going to spend too much time on it. At the end of the day, the most important thing to note is inbound investment or outbound investment does have some investor protections. In fairness, they exist in NAFTA. There's some additional protections in CETA. I think the reality of this is, for most businesses, this is not going to affect them, and definitely what I would say for SMEs, for most of the inbound type of businesses we're going to see in Canada, this is not going to be an issue, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's important to note it does create certain confidence for people both inbound and outbound with the investor protection provisions, and there's some controversy about them, and some of it rightfully so. I think you'll find that that'll get worked out, but I just laid that out there for you. So the economic determinants for Toronto. Again, we talked already about the services and the impact that CETA can have on services. The EU runs a constant and significant surplus on its services trade balance with Canada. Frankly, one that has exceeded its goods trade balance since 2007. It exports about 16 billion euros worth of services to Canada in 2014, double the amount that it did a decade earlier. Canada exports about 11.3 billion. Now, again, what's interesting about these numbers is the relativity, and that's why I highlight them to it. It's an economy of 300 million people versus an economy of 30 million people. 300 million people are exporting to Canada 16 billion of services. 30 million people are exporting almost 12. That should alone tell you the nature of the potential from a services side, outbound for Canada, for CETA. That alone, if you break it down, considering the size of the populations, tells you something about the impact of the amount of services going outbound that Europe represents for Canada. The EU is number 2 for Canada. Canada is EU's 12th most important trading partner. The EU is number 2 for Canada, accounting for nearly 10% of external trade. Again, what I look at CETA at the end of the day is it's the potential opportunity that it represents. We don't, frankly, in fairness, no one knows yet the impact that CETA will have. There's estimates, as you could see, for the European Union to boost annual economic output by 11.6 billion euros. Canada has put its economic gain at around 12 billion. So these are 5-year forecasts. So to be frank with you, the potentiality of CETA is what we make of it. We don't really know. We don't have as much of a historic relation like the U.S. that makes it easy to facilitate trade. A lot of CETA is going to be is new type of trade because, frankly, we just haven't done that much trade in a lot of areas where the tariffs have been very high. So it's from an economic development point of view, it's an opportunity, but it is an opportunity where you have to go make it an opportunity. You have to go look for it. It won't necessarily be just there to pick. You have to go out there and find it. But the good news is when you find it, it's not like someone will have been there before. And that's what I think is interesting. Again, I want to just highlight the fact from an inbound point of view, we expect to see pretty quickly in certain sectors an increase in trade between Europe and Canada. And the ones we talked about, food is particularly one. I think you'll see heavy industrials, 2, automotive sector, aerospace. Why? Because what history seems to show is that the tariffs in those sectors have had an impact on either creating interest or discouraging interest in trade. So what does that mean for Toronto? And by the way, I've highlighted the aggregate numbers to make you understand that Canada is actually doing, Europe, is actually trading already a lot with Canada, and frankly, even without the free trade agreement, was going to be trading more, and with the free trade agreement then, there's a potential to, from a magnitude perspective, to much increase that. But what does it mean from the City of Toronto's point of view in terms of economic development planning is, I think that the way to look at where we're going is you focus your efforts on the sectors that we're strong at. Obvious point, I think, from a perspective of where the economic activity will be. At the same time, from a perspective of a defensive approach, I mean, there will be Canadian and Toronto businesses that are going to be disadvantaged by CETA. There are no doubts about it. And so there's a debate there about what do we do for those businesses? But I think some of the traditional manufacturing sector, like we had with NAFTA, is going to be adversely affected by CETA, given the higher productivity and efficiency and just size of some of the European competitors that are coming. I think it's just the reality of trade. We've already seen it with NAFTA, so no one should be surprised. But where I think the real opportunity is, and I both from an inbound and outbound perspective, is to target certain industries where there's, in Canada, they're unconsolidated industries, meaning there's not one or two players who dominate the industry. Because I think you're going to see the Europeans be very focused on engaging in those sectors where it's easy to get in, easy to get market share, and we have a lot of those sectors in Canada. People assume too much in Canada, that, you know, we're basically made up in sectors of one or two players who kind of dominate. But actually, if you actually break down, whether it's food, whether it's industrial, whether it's a lot of sectors in Canada, and particularly subsectors, have an unconsolidated nature to them, meaning there's a lot of regional, local players, SMEs, who are doing very well. Those are the sectors, I think, that are going to be the most vulnerable, but also where the opportunities are the greatest, both for inbound and outbound. On the other hand, obviously, the big global players, it's going to be easy for them to enter. But of course, if they're entering into a marketplace already that has one or two strong players, that is what it is. And I think that's why the SMEs are the ones who either are going to have the most opportunities or, frankly, the most challenges. So you'll see, just to finish up, you'll see a likely increase in European investment in key areas, which we've talked about, mutual recognition and professional qualifications, easier to recruit European professionals to Toronto, easier transfers of company staff, improve ability of European and Canadian companies to provide after-sales services. I actually think this is an area where Toronto's going to really be benefited. Not only service sectors from the context of professional services, but the reality is, as we start working towards regulatory conformity, there will be a whole business sector focused on regulatory conformity between Canada and Europe. There's a whole opportunity there just in being leaders on the regulatory conformity side. And then access to Canadian European public tenders. There's a whole other side of this about local tendering and the impact it'll have on the city of Toronto. I haven't gone into that yet. I'm sure the city will deal with that as the RFP processes play out and it comes into play. And then the investor protection and dispute mechanisms. And I've set out the provisional applications. I discussed it a little earlier. I won't spend any time on those. People do ask about it. That's why I put it there for you. And then obviously we're happy to take any questions. And I hope you found this presentation useful.
Extremely so. Thank you very much for the presentation. We do have some questions. I'll start with Councillor Frakadakis first. Thank you, Councillor Grimes.
Yeah, I got a small question. I guess on your third page here, 98% of the tariffs will be limited day one. What's the 2% that won't be?
Oh, there's certain protections for certain industries that were specifically requested. So they're carve-outs they're very specified spaces and industries. So they won't be a particular relevance, I don't think, in Toronto. They're very certain type of industrial, certain type of manufacturing, very specific.
What about all that great wine over there? Was it?
Yeah. No, that's day one. Yeah, that's the food. That's day one.
90%.
That's fair. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh,
yeah, that's day one.
Okay, good.
You know.
Hope I buy you some time.
Problem solved. Okay, anyone else? Okay, Councillor Frakadakis? Go ahead.
So it says, and I quote, mutual recognition of professional qualifications, easier to recruit European professionals to Toronto through the chair to the presenters. That will work both ways, correct?
Absolutely. Oh, it could be, absolutely. You have to look at CETA as both a benefit and in some ways also a challenge, right? A challenge from a productivity level. Look, to your point, I'll say it on a broader level. We're going to be competing against European companies that in certain sectors simply have higher productivity, higher efficiency, bigger companies, and deeper pockets. In some ways, we have experience. We went through NAFTA. We went through, this is, for us, of course, I say that both with a hesitation, because for those of us who lived through NAFTA, it was very, there were entire industries that were decimated in NAFTA. I've become a free trader over time because it's the reality of who we've become in Canada. Some of us weren't free traders in 1988, but have become free traders. It's the reality of what we've decided as a country over the last 30 years. So you're right. You can't look at it just as an opportunity. You have to look at it as a challenge to Canadian companies to get ready for what's to come.
My next question is, is really about, if you could tell us a little bit more about the temporary entry provisions.
So they're still working out the details, and I'll be frank with you, I haven't seen the latest, but the idea, the idea is, and to give you a little context of where we are today, I mean, people might have some knowledge about this today from a U.S. point of view. You'll realize that even temporary entry in the U.S. for a short term is somewhat easy. For a longer term, it actually still requires a more complicated visa process. And what the European Union has asked for and Canada has agreed to is a much more simpler and facilitative process for temporary entry. So that, in fact, we're going to go to a much more, you're going to see, to put it to you in practical terms, a much more come to the border, I have the right documentation, you get a stamp, as opposed to, I got to do the documentation, I got to wait 6 months, I got to come back and I'm going to have questions on it, which is the typical process even now under NAFTA for anybody who stays beyond a certain period of time. So I think you'll see in the short term, like temporary as in what we would call the 6 months, what we're used to seeing from the U.S. But in the longer term, you're going to see even easier than the U.S. in the context of the Europeans did push back on and in fairness, there is some arguments that NAFTA's provisions are somewhat too restrictive in that it takes too long to get someone from the U.S. here when in a situation that should be just come to the border and stamp.
You mentioned food and beverage as an area in which this might have an immediate impact. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little on what you might expect, or and what we might expect.
Absolutely. And this is the one I spend a lot of time on. I have a lot of clients in the food and beverage space. So, and let's break that down. So, when we talk about food and beverage, there are certain industries, wine is a classic one, where there has been a high tariffs over 10% I call high. I mean, frankly, any tariff is cumbersome, but there are certain industries that have had high tariffs. And what you'll immediately see then on day one is some products will be impacted directly by as much as 18%. For example, all seafood products. There's been Europe and Canada have had horrible issues of anything seafood. Anything with seafood in it. So obviously it's not just an East Coast issue. I mean, we're producing food in Toronto, we're producing food with seafood. Anything with seafood in it had an impact because of an 18% tariff. I think it was as high as 18%. The price of that product will automatically, literally decrease by 18% if the producers and the manufacturers wish to pass that on to consumers. Now, we believe competition will start to take effect, so some of that savings will obviously be passed on. But you could see that there'll be an impact potentially of savings for the producers and the manufacturers of 18% net from day one. Now, how they pass that on is where we'll see. As you can imagine, it can go many different ways. It can be passed, it might not be passed on at all, in fairness, but usually it is. Not saying it will all be passed on. And what it means is, so look at it from the perspective of who's in the stronger position, who's better able to adapt, who can most manipulate that percentage savings. And so this is what we're going to see the impact, which is to say, to give you some examples, I think of some products that, I have a number of pasta manufacturers who are of course under a tariff in Canada from Europe. And these pasta manufacturers on day one will get basically an ability to decrease the price at the store for a product. There are Canadian pasta manufacturers as well who, basically now will face an international competitor if they wanted to, can pass on savings immediately. So from a direct competition point of view, has an impact. But let me go to a next level, which is CETA, different from NAFTA because of its regulatory conformity and all, it's actually going to encourage those pasta manufacturers, its hope is to encourage those pasta manufacturers to actually set up shop in Canada. And I think what you'll see is you're going to see a lot of these food companies go, okay, tariffs are gone, what's my best way to sell now? Now, I have to say this to you, it doesn't say it anywhere in CETA, but I have to tell you in practical terms, when we talk about selling in Canada, we should all not be illusory. Selling in Canada means selling in North America. Nobody comes to, I'm sorry if I say it's a surprise to anybody, when people come to set up to sell in Canada, it's not the third question that they say, how do I get to the U.S.? And so when I say selling in Canada, I hope it's all clear, I'm talking about selling in the U.S. ultimately. So they're going to come and say, is it more efficient for me to keep doing what I'm doing now without the tariffs? Or wait a minute, do I come and set up shop in Canada on the understanding that now I could leverage that both from a competition point of view in Canada to get to the US. Now, what's the positives? Of course, inbound for us is a huge positive, but of course we have local pasta manufacturers who are going to feel the brunt of a potentially bigger player who comes inbound and uses their resources to inbound investment, not even so much to compete in Canada, but to leverage to the US. And that's the opportunity, but also the challenge for the local pasta producer. And that's going to be the hard part for the SMEs.
Yeah.
I do actually have another question. I was wondering if you would indulge me. Yeah, sorry. Mario, we've heard a lot from the FCM, with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and others about some of the limits CETA will put on the municipal government's procurement policies. And perhaps the Government Management Committee is the better place to discuss those, but I was wondering if you had any insights on that.
Well, I haven't spent a lot of time on the municipal, but the way I look at it is from a practical view. There is going to be a threshold level when all municipal contracts are going to be subject to some of the CETA rule. Let's talk about, when I go to Europe and talk to Europeans about CETA, what they hate is they hate the fact that they believe governments in Canada steer contracts. And I'll use the one as the example, the Bombardier type thing. They feel that they use the name Bombardier over and over again. They hate the fact that they feel that there are discriminatory practices happening at a municipal level to just kind of, and look, we all know it happens both ways. But their goal of CETA was to try to limit the ability of municipal governments to use non-economic determinants in making decisions. And so that's why you'll see after a certain point, they're creating mechanisms whereby they can challenge I'll be blunt with you, they're going to challenge the ability, they're not going to be focused on the $1 million contract, but they are going to be focused on those big procurement contracts where they in the past, and I hate to use Bombardier, it's a great company, but they're going to be focused on those, and I expect you're going to see them challenge those decisions, because historically those decisions have I hate to use the word ground, but I think that's the right, they've grinded the Europeans to feel as though we only lost that because they were Canadian. They do feel some of that.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Frankadakis. Just a quick question for Mr. Tonelli. The Chamber obviously has had a number of conferences and meetings and talking a little bit about, talking a lot about CETA and so on. I'm just wondering, are those going to continue as we move forward? And will we see the opportunity to be able to invite a broader section of local businesses to the table to understand or to unpack the agreement itself in terms of looking at impact and opportunities?
Definitely. I can definitely confirm that the Italian Chamber of Commerce started following actually the negotiation since the early stage of the CETA agreement, up to the point that sometimes became a little bit frustration because the negotiations were going on and we didn't have a specific answer to all the different companies, especially the Italian ones, but also the Europeans. As with regards to, of course, when the CETA would be actually implemented. So I can definitely confirm that because this is a part of what we do. This is the nature, actually, of the Italian Chamber of Commerce. We act as a bridge, and we see the CETA agreement as a tremendous opportunity for not only for the European companies to come to Canada, but also for Canada to go to Europe. It's particularly important because I believe it is going to help a lot also diminishing a little bit what is has been some of the problems that the companies, I can speak for the Italian companies, but of course some of the European companies have encountered to come to Canada when it comes to investment. So we're particularly happy about that because it's going to give us a tool to promote even more efficiently, for example, the Toronto area for the Italian companies that want to invest here. And God knows if there are a lineup of companies that are just willing to come here and to invest their money. For obvious reason, we all know that the situation in Europe sometimes, actually, in the past years, it hasn't been that good. So I can speak because I see that every year the Italian companies wants to invest. They just need a good opportunity, and the CETA agreement is going to just enhance these opportunities, for sure.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. We have a next speaker who is Leif Nelson. Is Mr. Nelson here? Leaf Nelson.
I don't actually think he's here.
Going third time, Mr. Nelson. Okay, seeing none. Okay, are there any speakers to this item? Okay, seeing none. Councillor Grimes?
Great presentation. Perhaps if this does roll in the spring, it'd be great to get them back. Maybe, I'm not too sure when, be the fall, late fall, or...
We'll work with the chamber.
Yeah, love to get them back and get an update.
Sure.
As that gets rolling.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so moving receipt of the presentation. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, members, moving right along, we are now moving to ED 18.9. No, he's not here. We already called him. Thanks. Thank you for helping to manage. This is TO Core update. Jonathan Ahi. Okay, we'll have Jonathan Ahi. Going twice? Jonathan Ahi. Okay, Jonathan's not here. I don't see him. All right, members, what's your wish on this particular item? Any question? Okay. Councillor Frakadakis is moving the recommendations that are here. This is from the Film and Digital Media Board. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Thank you. All right, moving to ED 18.10, the establishment of an Internet movie database page. Again, I have Jonathan Ahi is the speaker. He's not here. I just call him. Jonathan Ahi is not here. That's twice. Jonathan Ahi. Okay, so Jonathan's not here as a speaker. So we will now, members, any questions? Councillor, you had a question?
No, I don't actually. I just want to speak.
Okay, just give me a second, please. Just 1 second, please. Sorry. Councillor Grimes, did you have a question?
Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't mind if Mr. Williams should give us a 2-3 minute
over.
what this is
Okay.
about, being a new member and maybe...
Okay, so we have Mr. Williams who's here, which is great.
Yeah, well,
However,
whoever it should be.
we will direct it to the film commissioner and director of all those things entertainment, Mr. Zabe Sheikh.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. In terms of just a quick overview, this is a recommendation by our Toronto Film, Television and Digital Media Board that they're broken up into working groups, and the development and branding and marketing working group recommended that Toronto look at the possibilities of maintaining, organizing, coordinating an IMDb page as per the City of Toronto, which has, IMDb is a great website, a great source in the film, television, and media industry for people to find out what's happening with whom. Normally, frankly, it's for directors, actors, designers, those kinds of folks in the business. But of course, jurisdictions do get credit when when productions come, and so this would be exploring that idea according to the recommendation.
Great,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you very much, Mr. Zabe. Questions further? Okay, I just have questions. No, I have no questions. Okay. All right, so just a couple of questions through to you, Zabe. So how is this done, the IMDb page done in other jurisdictions? Are municipalities the ones actually putting the page? Because as I understand, there's a big database that was developed some 29 years ago by a particular individual. Is it a company? Is it a not-for-profit? How does that work?
Thank you, Chair. It is a...
No,
It's a company.
Okay.
And it's a service, it's a database, as you rightly pointed out. And how it works on the industry level, and I'll break it down in terms of the people, because largely IMDb is a place where you find people and what they're doing. When they are in productions, when they work in productions, whether they're behind the scenes or in front of the scenes, the production gives credit to those people. That official credit, as it relates to production sheets or budgets, gets logged into this database, and the algorithms collect and say, oh, look, this movie or this television productions has this many people on it, these were the actors, these were the people behind the scenes. Once you are given that credit, you have the option to join the service, because it's a free service in terms of the collection of the algorithm and the information as the productions plug them in. But if you want to enhance, coordinate, or do your own thing with it, you have to become a member. And then you pay for that membership, and then you can interact with the site and sort of, modify it as you see fit. Of course, it's still the information and the credit, because that's what this is about, the credits, really are driven by the actual production. So you wouldn't be able to say you were in something that you weren't, and in some cases, productions may feature you, but they don't always give you quote-unquote credit, and therefore then you would have to decide whether you wanted to take credit.
Right. And so in terms of collecting the information to obviously populate the page and the data, how does that work? Whose responsibility? Because there are many activities in the sector taking place in the City of Toronto. Are we required to have a specific dedicated staff person to do that, or how do you do the uploads or the adding the information to the data? How is that done?
Thank you, Chair. I'll just give you the sort of rudiments. Yes, a person would manage, or I'll again break it down for an actor or a director. If they have management, or if they themselves, or if they have a team, they would manage it like a social media account, like any account. You'd have to manage it yourself, quote unquote, or put staff if you are a team to it.
Okay, so the city is going to be the one developing the page that's going to be uploaded or loaded onto this database system, is that correct?
The recommendation is that in general, there are specifics to it, because as I said, the way it works is that productions give you the credit. So then you have to make sure that, my name, for instance, is Zabe Sheikh. So it's easy for them to go, okay, Zabe's in something. So they'll put my name, and then I can now interact if I become a member. But if the City of Toronto or the Toronto Film and Entertainment Industries or ECDEV wants to be recognized in a certain way consistently, or just the City of Toronto, then you have to make sure that that's what you're known as. I'm known as Zabe Sheikh, so when I work on a production, that's who they cast. They don't cast cities in the same way, so we would have to coordinate. Sorry, it's a complicated process.
Yeah, so I understand that. So Zabe Sheikh, the actor, who is going to be listed on this particular page that's going to be set up by the City of Toronto, your name being on this page, is there a person in the City of Toronto that's responsible for collecting that data, putting that information so it goes on the page?
There would have to be a person dedicated, or some people dedicated to coordinating that, because productions lead the information process, but coordinating imagery and all that, if you want to become a member, you have to then have someone on this side of things doing that.
So this isn't as simple as it sounds.
No, it isn't as simple as it sounds. It never is.
So my fear is...
For a human being it is, but for an entity like the city, it would be less simple.
So we're being asked essentially to do this. Is there enough information here for us to make that decision today?
No, I think that's that. I think no.
Refer this to the general manager to review and to report back. Would that be the case? Okay.
If you don't want to hear me ramble on and on about it, Chair, then yes, absolutely, we can get you some hard, fast information.
Want to move, because really, with the motion here is asking the general manager and culture to develop, establish, and maintain an internet movie database. But right now, we don't have all the information, all the particulars associated with it.
True.
Would that be correct?
That would be correct.
All right. Okay, thank you. Anyone further to question? Okay. All right, Councillor Frакadakis?
Well, I've been asked by Councillor Fletcher to move an amendment to the motion that is before us that came from the... Do you have copies of the motion? No, I was going to ask it to get it on the screen. I only got it a little while ago. Yeah, I've been asked to move it, so... there was an addition to the motion, was that an update be provided to the Toronto Film, Television and Digital Media Board by the end of the first quarter of 2017. That's the amendment I've been asked to move. Okay, this isn't really my initiative, but obviously we help our colleagues that are not on the committee.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. So, Mr. General Manager, or Mr. Film Commissioner, whoever I'm speaking to, this recommendation that's here, and even with the amendment is asking to report on something that you would have established, as opposed so I'm a little bit concerned with respect to which comes first, us agreeing to do something and then reporting back on it, or having to do the detailed research and the deep dive, as we've heard from the film commissioner. There are potentially possibility of having a staff implication, and I'd like to understand that in further detail. So I'd like to refer this particular matter to you to review and to report back to this committee at, I don't know, as early as you can. When would that be? Would it be April?
We'd come back at the next...
Next committee meeting with a report that details, obviously, the particulars as it relates to this request.
Yes.
I'm uncomfortable in making this type of decision, hearing from the film commissioner in terms of what the requirements are, and having the review that I've done online, looking at this, this sort of setup. There's a lot more to it than what is actually in the recommendations that are here, and even with respect to the amendment. So that would be, okay. All right, so the clerk is just working on this. So could I just ask if there's anybody else to comment on this or to ask a question? Okay, so could I just, Councilor Papadakis, I'm just going to set this down for a moment because the clerk is working that. All right, so we will just do that. Madam Clerk, we'll come back right back, and we can then move to ED 1811, Councilor. Yeah, price, so that's the opportunity. So now we are moving to ED 1811, which is the Toronto Economic Bulletin, and there are questions. Councillor Frакadakis to question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So on Wednesday at the Planning and Growth Management meeting, planning staff presented their Toronto Employment Survey 2016, and you have it posted on your Economic Data Center website. And I was wondering, how much do you compare notes with the people who worked on that to see what can be learned by reviewing your ongoing economic bulletins and their analysis?
We do a lot of work with planning on this. This is the best data source we have. We have access to detailed information that we're not allowed to publish, but we can analyze and utilize. So we have very detailed sectoral trends that come from that survey. We know a lot about what's going on because we know the locations of the respondents from the survey. So every workplace that they can find, we have data on. So we work a lot with them on this.
Great. So I looked at the average house price and see that the $770,480 as the most recent value, and same month last year is $671,350. And that's quite a jump year over year. And I see the cost of housing is having an impact on attracting and keeping parts of the labor pool. I understand from the presentation from Mrs. Webb earlier that she mentioned that as well. And yet the bulletin has two green ovals beside that information. And I was wondering, are there no negative economic implications to such an increase in the cost of housing in Toronto?
I think one of the charts that I think was important in Ms. Webb's presentation was the comparison to the Vancouver price. So we get a lot of attention on the rate of increases going on right now, and that's faster than the BC, but our level of prices are still significantly below Vancouver's, and they're below a lot of other places in the world that we compete with. So from the point of view of a negative economic impact, we don't see that as dramatic right now. I would assume if it continued like this, we'd become very concerned about the affordability across the entire region.
You're not at the moment concerned about the percentages because of the real numbers?
Correct. We're still not outrageously expensive compared to other places, although the rate, as I said, that rate between 15 and 16 was a very significant jump, but we're still below lots of other places.
So on page 7 and 8, the bulletin talks about tall buildings and office space. And back in 2015, ECDEV staff compiled a list of new non-residential developments in the pipeline. And on that list was 30 Bay Street, listed at 944,000 square feet of office space with an ETA of 2017. And I've heard the federal government is not proceeding with that project. And I was wondering if you've heard the same thing, and if so, should we be worried that our federal government is pulling back on this project?
My simple answer is I don't know, and I don't know if any of my colleagues do. So we'll get an answer for that.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Do you wish to speak on anyone else a question? Okay, so you'll move the, we'll just move that items. All those in favor, opposed, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk, ready? So how do we treat that? Okay, so, members, we're just going to do that now. Okay, so I have a motion with respect to ED 1810. This is a referral motion to the general manager, as I indicated, to do some work. This is probably something that we should do and will do. I don't know that at this particular point in time. I'm uncomfortable with respect to what's actually in front of us at the moment. We've heard from the film commissioner that there is perhaps the opportunity, the requirement in terms of staffing, and I don't know what this will cost and so on. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to have the general manager come back with a report detailing all of this detailed, and then allow us to be able to make a decision on this. It may be something we do. I don't know, but at this particular point in time, what I have in front of us, for us to just to simply make this decision without the full detail, I don't think that's the most effective way to deal with this.
What's that mean, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Fragedakis' motion?
So it would act, if this passes, that motion is redundant. The matter would come back at the next meeting with details. Okay. All right.
Might as well just withdraw it. Huh?
Sure, that's fine. Okay, sorry. Let me just chair the meeting, please. So the matter is in front of us here as the referral, and so that's what we'll be voting on now. So all those in favor of the referral, okay? So that's, I'll record a vote on that, please. Madam Clerk?
All those in favor of the referral to the general manager, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Grimes, Councillor Holland, Councillor Kelly. All those opposed? Councillor Fragedakis, that motion carries.
Thank you very much, okay? All right, thanks. All right, now we are basically done. So I'd like to ask, we just finished 11. That was quick. All right, so motion to adjourn. Councillor Holland and Vice Chair, thank you very much. We are adjourned, everybody, and thank you very much to the staff. Okay.